Hello and welcome to My Emotional Armor, the podcast where we discuss the effects of covert narcissistic parenting. I am your host, Cindy Koo, a survivor and robot warrior here to share the ways emotional armor can help you heal, stay safe, and regain your sense of self. Hello. Hope you're all enjoying the last few weeks of warm weather and finding some time to get outside. I am currently on the East Coast and the leaves are just starting to change color. So there's this really beautiful mix of green to gold, orange, and red. I took a couple of short trips to upstate New York and it's just so picturesque. So alright, now that I've painted that really lovely scene for you, let's talk about all the things that piss us off. No, really, I actually do want to talk about anger today. So if you're here listening to this podcast, you've likely just awoken to the fact that you were raised by a covert narcissist. It's not an easy answer to find. There's a lot of denial, cognitive dissonance, fear of the truth, more denial, and then finally you start to open the lid on Pandora's box. And now here you are. Welcome to My Emotional Armor. You have arrived. While it's great to receive validation and learn that other people share your experience, this revelation doesn't always feel good. Yes, you're starting to finally put words to things like enmeshment, gaslighting, narcissistic supply, gray rock, etc. But the side effects of this knowledge is that now you have the responsibility to go back and untangle your past. You're looking at your childhood through an entirely different lens, one where you experienced invalidation when you should have been allowed to express freely. It's an upbringing that should have encouraged your independence and unique identity instead of stunting it. The mourning period for what should have been can be considerable. It's necessary and healthy to grieve that loss. Up until this point, you may have worshipped your CNP, believed everything they said about you and other people. It may have all come to a head now in therapy or because of a particular incident that caused you to uncover the truth about your upbringing. Or you could very well be someone who has always known this, and if that's the case, that is awesome. I wish we all could have known about covert narcissism as early as you did. But what I find is that most My Emotional Armor listeners are just waking up to this information. As a result, it's pretty jarring. When you start to shine a light on your past, you see all the things that went wrong. This results in feelings of frustration, disappointment, and hurt, which are all base emotions that lead to anger. When you grieve the childhood you should have had, it's natural to experience intense anger through this process. Now, as you may know, anger is one of the stages of grief. But contrary to what many of us think, it's not like you progress through the stages in a linear fashion. We tend to think of it as a video game sometimes. Great, I beat the denial level. That means I fight the boss at anger until finally I win the princess at acceptance. Now, besides being kind of chauvinistic, it's not accurate of how human emotion really works. We actually move back and forth between these stages throughout our lives for any given loss. They may lessen in intensity and frequency over time, but in a way, the loss and corresponding feelings will always be a part of us. And this isn't just me theorizing. This is information I got from my own therapist. She told me this because I was frustrated that I still found myself getting angry over my CNP at times, even though I'd fully accepted them. And there are two causes of anger we may experience when we look at our past with a CNP. The first is towards the parent. We are mad they treated us the way they did and still continue to. We're hurt that they've chosen their ego over us time and time again. We also feel disappointed for how things were and maybe even still are in our lives right now. We resent that we have to do this work to sort things out. That's the first cause, and if you can believe it, the easier one to deal with. The second one hits closer to the heart, and that's the anger with yourself. Had you known then what you know now, you probably would have done things differently in your life. You may have unknowingly been an enabler or flying monkey to your CNP. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a person who basically does the CNP's bidding. And I'll link to resources for some of the terms I use here in the show notes. But an example would be, let's say in your narcissistic family, the CNP treated someone like a scapegoat. They would blame and shame them for anything that went wrong. You, as a child who didn't know any better, may have mimicked this behavior because it was your example and you looked up to your CNP. Now, as an adult, you may feel extreme regret and anger with yourself for treating this person as a scapegoat. To give you a personal example, the scapegoat relative in my family died before I discovered that my parent was a covert narcissist. I treated this relative very poorly with the same contempt my CNP did well into my adulthood. I feel a lot of shame and regret for that. That's time I'll never get back with that person. I hated my parent for this, but I hated myself for it more. So what do we do with this outpouring of anger? First of all, as hard as it is, you've got to forgive yourself. Forgiveness for the CNP is a personal choice. It's negotiable. Letting yourself off the hook is not. You will be 100% miserable if you go through your life carrying guilt for things that you didn't know about. Now, I know that may sound hypocritical. Well, if I forgive myself, don't I have to forgive my parents too? Not necessarily. It's up to you. But I will tell you this. Either way, you have to forgive yourself first. There's no way you can accept what your parents did if you can't fully accept what you did. So work on that first and decide about your parents later. There's a quote by Oprah that I think is relevant here. It goes, "Forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could have been any different." I love this because it doesn't condone or excuse anything. It simply says, given all the circumstances, that's how it went down. So yes, you may have been someone who was mean to others or bolstered your CNP's ego in your past. You can take responsibility for that by apologizing if that person is still around, and certainly by not doing it again moving forward. But prior to that, you didn't know what you didn't know. It may sound like a cop-out, but that is the situation. It is really like doing poorly on a test that you were given on the first day of class. How can you be expected to do well? But now that you have the knowledge, now that you've studied for the test, how are you going to use it? If you are here listening to this, you are a person who is interested in self-reflection and awareness. People who come here aren't trying to be stuck. So I am 100% sure you will use that knowledge to be better and do better. And so in the midst of all this wonderful forward motion, you find yourself still pissed off. Understandable. What do you do with it? Since we have anger, can we make use of it? And how? The answer is yes, and I am going to share some things that have worked for me. First and foremost, acknowledge your anger. Feel it fully. Sit with those feelings. And I don't mean to sound all woo-woo here, but the thing is, as a CNP survivor, you were told for a very long time that either your anger didn't exist or that you had no right to be angry. So your first instinct a lot of times when you feel this way is to dismiss yourself. Resist that urge and settle into it for a beat. You can do this by literally writing down, "I feel angry because," or I like to also say it in the mirror. We can be afraid of our own anger, not only because we were taught that it was wrong, but because we remember the narcissistic rage we experience from our CNPs. We also might be afraid that if we let ourselves be angry once, we'll always be angry. That will turn into a chupacabra or something. We can also incorrectly associate it with ingratitude or not loving our parents. It's not a binary though. You can still feel lots of anger and lots of love for the same person, even in the same moment. Tell yourself that nothing bad is going to happen if you express your feelings on paper or privately speak these words. You've got to practice doing this. If you want to use your anger productively, if you have any hope of doing that, you need to first realize that it is there and allow it to take up space. Second tip, don't express it to your covert narcissistic parents. It's not going to go well. We already know this. Unless explicitly asked by them or you're feeling a real green light moment, resist that urge. Now look, I am all in favor of being open and honest, but it's got to be with the right people. How many times have you challenged your CNP and left confused and gaslighted? Unless they are in therapy and really, I mean really, trying to make a change, their reaction to you is not going to change. Keep this process internal, and if you want to share it with someone, do it with someone who has proved they are emotionally supportive. This leads me to tip number 3. Don't max out your friends. Everyone has a limit to how much venting they can take. So be mindful of the amount of anger you're sharing with others. I'm sure the last thing you want to do is spread negativity and be that guy or that gal or that they. A good way to do this is before you start venting, say you're going to do this for 5 minutes and then you're moving on to another topic. Put a quantity on your anger when it involves other people. It holds space for the emotion without making other people overly responsible for it. But what if you need more time? 5 minutes isn't cutting it. Totally happens. You can give this to yourself. Enter tip 4. Listen to music. Make a pissed off playlist. Mine is called DNA, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. This may sound teenage angsty, but honestly, it works for me. By curating the songs, I feel like I'm tapping into lyrics and sounds that reflect what I'm feeling inside. It gives my anger a voice, melody, and again, the space it needs to exist. Tip number 5, work out to the playlist and think about why you're angry. Honestly, this is so great. My best workouts happen when I'm pissed off. I feel like a superhero in beast mode. You're essentially taking that energy and channeling it into your body for your health. Make sure, of course, that you're stretching, watching your form, and all that good stuff. This leads into tip number 6. Beat something up. If you have a punching bag, first of all, I'm jealous, but this physical contact is a great way to really get out your aggression. I recently used those workout bands that are really popular online, and I just use them to beat the living crap out of a couch cushion. Curse and say the things you need to say if it feels right. Chances are this anger has been living inside you for quite some time, looking for a way out. Tip 7, write, do art, or do something else that's creative. Again, this is about utilizing energy, not trying to become the next Jackson Pollock. It doesn't matter what it looks like. And I want to be clear that the goal is to get out the energy, not quiet it. This is not your Zen moment. That can come later. You're not trying to necessarily calm down with this. If doing yoga or breathing works, by all means, do you. But if you find yourself unsatisfied with this, then I am offering a different solution, which is to release it creatively. What I mean by that is paint, draw, or collage about the thing that's pissing you off. Write about it. See it leaving your body. Some of my best poetry comes from when I'm angry. Some of my shittiest poetry does too, for that matter. The point is that it's out there. At best, you have the beginnings of a Pulitzer Prize. And at worst, well, you just use your anger towards something creative. Both not too shabby. Tip 8. Once you've got it all out there and you're more mellow yellow, think about what might be the root cause. You've probably heard that anger is a secondary emotion, and there's usually another one hanging out beneath it. These are things like guilt, resentment, frustration, fear, embarrassment, shame, abandonment, exclusion. And that's just a few. Try those words on and see if any of them hit. As in, literally ask yourself, do I feel guilty? Am I afraid of something? From there, you can decide if there's anything different you'd like to do. For example, I recently felt very agitated with my CMP when he gave me a long-winded, confusing excuse for why he didn't want to help with something. It didn't upset me that he didn't want to help. I was more upset that he placed me at the center of his reasoning, saying that he didn't want to help because it would be, quote, best for me. In actuality, he just didn't want to do it. Give me a break though. Spare me the sacrificial song and dance. Anyways, beneath my anger was disappointment. I was disappointed that here he was decades later pulling the same shit, and here I am still pissed off about it. Once I named the puppy, i.e. disappointment, I was able to see that it was all par for the course. Eventually, I calmed down and went back into my usual state of accepting that is what it is. Tip number 9 relates to the last one. While you should explore the level 1 emotion behind your anger, don't go assigning meaning to it about you as a person. You felt angry and disappointed. Nothing more, nothing less. Don't go digging around trying to find ways this makes you a damaged or a bad person. It's not true. As the saying about Freud goes, sometimes an eggplant is just an eggplant. You can feel angry and listen to complaint rock. That doesn't make you an immature teenager. It makes you a human being who knows what to do when they feel angry. And last but not least, tip number 10. It's going to happen again. Know this now. I have the toughest time with this one. I don't know if it's the perfectionist in me or what, but I seem to strive for not being angry ever, which is impossible. Anger, just as well as happiness and joy, are part of being a human. My grandma said it best to me once after a breakup. I was all upset and crying after my boyfriend dumped me. I was telling her I didn't know what to do and I was so frustrated and sad. And she just looked at me and said very neutrally, "So you had a breakup and now you have a feeling." It wasn't overly compassionate or flowery or even empowering or inspiring. It was just the facts, but it helped me so much. Now, I know her advice wasn't about covert narcissism, but I think you can see the correlation there. You had an experience growing up, and now you have feelings about it. That's it, man. One of those many feelings is anger. We talk a lot about CNPs here, but this show is really for you, the survivors. I want very much to help you live a healthy life, a life that you want. And yes, sometimes that means examining covert narcissistic behavior to gain a better understanding so that you can move forward. With that, I hope the last handful of tips helps you channel and explore your anger. I'd love to hear your thoughts and any tips you might have. Go ahead and leave them in the comments if you do. Until next time, stay safe and beat up a couch cushion if you need to. Thank you again for tuning into this episode of My Emotional Armor. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave a review. And if you have any topics you'd like to hear about on the show, please fill out the contact form online at myemotionalarmor.com. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, stay safe and armored up.